Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I am Dustin Ray. And today I have a quote for you. The quote is, "My job is to not have any technical skill whatsoever. My job is to know what I like." And that is by Rick Rubin. So I think
Hmm.
that's what we're going to be talking about today. That quote used to be about music. So to give people context, Rick Rubin is a famous music producer. He has definitely worked with artists that you know, no matter who you are. He has worked with artists that you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that quote used to be about music, but I think what we're talking about today is how that applies to software. You want to kick us off with a little bit about what you think about that, Isaac?
Sure. I mean, that is definitely a controversial quote, I think, in the tech space, right? Because I think in the creativity space or the
Right.
artsy space, that's not super controversial. Like the people want to be like you're encouraged to be yourself and have your own flavor and do things your way. Whereas in the tech space, you don't often, I mean, sometimes you can read somebody's code and go, oh, I know exactly who wrote this. There
Right.
are telltale signs of style, so to speak, in people's programming. But generally speaking, you're not programming your own style, at least in the on back end. We'll keep it to back end. We'll keep it away from the artsy front end stuff.
Mm-hmm.
On the back end stuff, you're really just trying to connect 2 points. You're trying to get data flowing from the database as an endpoint to the front end, or efficiently run some kind of query. And there's not much of a style to it that is to be had other than you need this thing to run very efficiently. And if anything, your style is just how good you are at coming up with an efficient solution to the problem, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your
Would you say
thoughts
that there's a
on
readability factor in there, though?
uh, as far as like how you add comments to your code and how you name your functions and things like that?
Yeah, like even how you like structure it. I think that there's an argument that
Mm-hmm.
some like software engineers have that I call it like the craft argument of like, I
Hmm.
write, such handcrafted software that it's so special because it's my brainchild, and it's this,
Yeah,
it's not only is it efficient and performs, but it's readable by a human.
yeah.
Do you feel like that applies here?
I think no matter what you're talking about, you can make something an art form, even if it's
Yeah.
something very purely statistical or mathematic or computer
Hmm.
software. So you can certainly have your own style to something and do things your own way, which I get like the quote is like, essentially do it your way, have your own personal style to it,
Right.
like be true to yourself kind of vibes, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, but there's times when that doesn't pass the smell test when it comes to like actually giving software to somebody and handing it over. If it was true to yourself and how you did it, but it was slow, then
Right.
being yourself isn't acceptable in this particular case.
Right.
You
Right.
must be someone else. You must adhere to conformity when it comes to certain things like speed or like efficiency or database indexing and things like that. But
Hmm.
I'd certainly say, yeah, there's an art to readable code. There's an art to naming things,
Hmm.
placing things in the right area, organization, essentially.
Right. Right.
There's an art to organization, even if the organization itself is purely a systematic, what is the most efficient way to do it? You can still be artful in the way that you make things systematic and efficient and beautiful in that sense.
Yeah. What role do you feel like engineers play, even today, or in the past, when it comes to kind of crafting the taste of the software? So not just like the UI and the branding, but
Mm.
like about the experience. Like, and that could mean not just in the user experience, not just in the UI, but like how does this help me with my workflow, or how does this, because maybe it's possible that I work in a company that has some software that I have to use. I used to have
Hmm.
my own bespoke workflow, but now in order to get my data integrated with everybody else's data who's in the field doing my same job, I have to do it a certain way because the software was made that way. what
Okay.
what role do you feel like the engineer has to play, kind of thinking about that from the user's perspective in this case, like when it comes to like taste or something like that?
Maybe worded a little differently. I'm kind of confused at kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, so like I think traditionally we've seen product and design really kind of own the user experience side of it, and not just from the UI,
Hmm.
but like the framework of, like, you could think of like jobs to be done. Like, what is the user trying to accomplish? And I think what
Okay.
we've
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
traditionally is the engineer is a little removed from that, and that kind of creates a friction between product and
Right.
engineer. And I think the way, at least what I've seen in the last few years, is engineers getting a lot closer to that process, and actually even being involved in that process to kind of steer that experience
Yeah.
for the user based on like what's possible or what's available to them in their
I
tech
understand
stack
what you're
and
getting at
whatever.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I think we've discussed this in prior episodes too, or at least touched on it, but there
Mm-hmm.
used to be this concept of an engineer who was just like a stickler for acceptance criteria. And if it's not an
Right.
acceptance criteria in the story, I'm not going to deliver it. And it was almost like you received an order at a restaurant and you produced exactly what's on the order, right? And that's a very mechanical thing. That's a very taking things literal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you don't want to take things literally in computer science. Might be a controversial thing to say, but essentially, as my role as a principal engineer is when someone, if I look at a story, I want to go, especially if a product person wrote it, because sometimes product people will get a little too pushy on how it should be implemented,
Mm-hmm.
and really all they need to tell me is what the problem is, and then let me come up with a solution for it, the implementation details, right? There's some nuance there too, and some back and forth discussion, but I
Right.
should be the one kind of coming up with that solution. And I noticed this recently when I was using some agentic workflows. When I had it talking to Jira, it would pull in the story, and it implemented exactly what was in the story, and it did a pretty good job at it. Actually, did a fantastic job at it. But one thing I noticed is the way it implemented it. I wouldn't have done it this particular way because I knew that there was a better way to do it. But it didn't care that there was a better way to do it. It
Right.
it followed on the instructions of what the product team was asking for. And not only that, it did a very literal job at creating this thing. And my job as a principal engineer is kind of like to step in there and create a new kind of rule set for AI and say, before you implement this, one, understand the kind of the core thing of what you're trying to solve, like
Mm-hmm.
the customer's problem, which I'll get to in a second with like that bridging that gap with talking to product and the customer's complaint. But two, if how you solve it, does it fall in line with standard engineering practices, or are you solving it a weird one-off way?
Right.
Because
Right.
it'll do a very literal job at building it. But what if you can also solve the same problem a little less efficiently, but you follow a standard, right? Because a lot of times we love standards in computer science. We
Right.
don't want a custom date on just this area here.
Mm-hmm.
How about
Right.
you look and see how we do dates, globally and across the application instead of just taking literally what they said to do or literally from a Figma design or something like that and
Right.
implementing that, right? So as we that becomes kind of my role. That's kind of that's the skill I want to actually write. What something like the principal engineer skill is where before you work on the story, is it worth working on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't even program it. What if things have changed since you picked up the story? What if that's not even a priority anymore?
Right.
Two, should you implement it literally, or there is an easier way to do it? And three, as you implement it, can you think of any better, like standard computer science practices that would make this easily testable or whatever as you implement it too?
Yeah.
Um, so that context is super important. And I say all that as a preface, mostly because the most effective products that I've helped deliver are the ones where I, as an engineer, sat in on those meetings.
Mm.
Like a lot of times, you'd have product team talking to a customer, and they'd have all these issues. Oh, why doesn't it do this? Why doesn't it do that? They'd either be angry, or it's a meeting where you're just curious and trying to solve a problem or figure out what kind of, maybe you're like shadowing somebody to see how they do their thing, and you go, oh, I can make that easier, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then there's a mysterious meeting. You're not in it as an engineer, or in the days prior, we
Right.
weren't in those meetings a lot of times. And then product would come away with, I have the best, most knowledgeable takeaway of what needs to be done. Here's what you should do. You should build an API, and this API endpoint should have this. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Can we start with
Right.
like the problem? And so as I started
Mm-hmm.
sitting in on those meetings as an engineer, I could think of, oh, okay, this person has this problem. I can think of three different ways to solve it. There's this long-term way. There's this quick
Mm-hmm.
short-term way if we
Right.
want to do an MVP. There's like the middle way. You hear this a lot in like contracting work where you have like
Mm-hmm.
three different ways to do it. And there's like the expensive way, the fast way, and then the one in
Right.
between. And then that knowledge, if you give back to the product person, that's fantastic for understanding velocity for sprints because you can actually get that information back to them. And they might have one answer of what we need to do. And you could be like, I actually have a hacky way we could do that using this third-party product that you don't know about, but
Right.
I, as an engineer, have used a lot. And that would save us this and buy us more time here. And that context, which is a key word, especially in AI lately,
Mm-hmm.
is super important. And so I think that's the role engineers, long-winded answer to your question, that's
Mm-hmm.
the role that engineers should have going forward, is like that more integration into the product teams, and that uh, with the customer too, the customer's
Right.
problem points. And that's kind of like the the new role that they will have going forward.
Right.
That's the responsible role they should have in engineers going forward, is like the flavor they should add to it, is to be sitting in, understanding the problem points, essentially, and working with product during the decisions, not after the decisions are made.
Right. So to contrast that to the example you gave of the, let's call it the more mechanical engineer, right? You
Mm-hmm.
would say that the difference between the two of your example and that example is not necessarily about technical skill, but it's about
No.
the taste in having the right context, and I think that's kind of like one of the things that we take for granted as humans is I think our brains are really good at taking in a lot of things and being like, okay, all of that's noise, here's signal, this
Mm-hmm.
is all I got to work with, and I don't think that the machines are necessarily as good at that yet. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the things that I think, to your point, is that's the gap that the human engineers are filling right now, is
Right.
that taste, like what context is important here to make the correct decisions and like a coherent or cohesive experience, or whatever it is, like the delivery, or whatever. So I think that kind of goes to this point of, you know if technical skill is now, it's like almost not really a consideration outside of how do you leverage the technical skill to get the right context. Is that something that resonates with you?
Um, I guess the way you phrased it again, you said a lot there. So I'll
Okay.
just pieces of it, and then we'll just kind of toy around with it.
Perfect.
Because the first thing I was thinking of is when you were talking about that mechanical style engineer and
Mm-hmm.
taste. Humans are really good at a pattern, like the signal from the noise. They're really good at pattern recognition in
Right.
general. It's like just what humans are famous for. Really good at pattern recognition. It's the reason why we still have people in Amazon warehouses sorting stuff and not robots doing that yet, right? So that context is still something very important to the developer. Whereas, and so I think the software engineering role that we see evolving today with AI is evolving with the concept, and ironically, of being more human. And I think I mentioned in the last time we talked about this thing, because it is no longer 90% of your work is no longer in a dark cave, hunched over, typing in front of a
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
brightly lit screen, right, where you're solving the problem. That can be done for you. And so all the people who are sticklers for, oh, that's not an acceptance criteria, you know, if all you can do is literally follow a set of instructions, then you're no better than an AI right now. What we
Right.
need is people who can look at that and understand, I'm not actually even going to work on this. We need an AI smart enough to be told, work on this. And it goes, I don't think we should.
Right.
Because right now it doesn't do that.
Right.
You can you can play around with skills and make it do that. But that context is the really part that's, I'm guessing that's like the flavor thing, the taste thing that
Mm-hmm.
you're getting at here,
Yeah.
is understanding creative ways to solve a problem, but understanding the human aspects of why we're even doing this to begin with.
Yep.
Because if we're automating grunt work essentially, and sorry, software engineers, but our work has been reduced to grunt work at this point. We can be smart enough to do it by hand, but in the
Mm-hmm.
same way, you might not want to pay $800 for a wooden handcrafted box, and you might just need
Right.
a random box at Home
Yeah.
Depot because you just need to store your stuff. You know, somebody might prefer that one day. Oh, cool, handcrafted coat, and it's
Right.
at the farmer's market, but not anymore, right? So that taste doesn't necessarily mean the coat, because of the grunt work aspect of it that it's devolved to. Now we care about the human aspect of it. So don't know if that answers the question you were getting at there or
Yeah,
not.
it
If
does.
not, just rephrase it. Okay.
No, it does. Yeah, and I kind of want to pull on a thread too to see if we're thinking about this the same way. So let me give you an analogy. You would
Sure.
say that a chef could have a taste about the food that he makes, or the seasoning, or like a certain style of food, but there's also the style in which that he prepares the food as a different
Yeah.
type of taste. So I want to separate those two things of like, there is the taste of doing the work and the craft of
Yes.
software engineering, but then I think that that doesn't mean that software engineers should not be able to develop a taste for the products that they build, whether they're consumer or
Yeah.
B2B, whether you live in that context or not. It doesn't matter. I can go from two different softwares and tell you, like this, don't like that, don't like that, don't like this, don't like this. And even if I
Hmm.
don't know how to do your job, I can see what would cause friction, right? And I think that
Yeah.
there's two different things there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's actually kind of a fascinating metaphor for the food metaphor for it, because you've got like the technical skill, so to speak, of knowing how to
Yeah.
cook the thing, but
Right.
there's the taste of it is understanding which flavors go well together, or
Right.
which don't actually. But
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, you would never think to pair together, but the good chefs will be like this and that, and you're like, I would never in 1,000 years put those two
Right.
flavors
Or
together,
even like
but they thought this
portions,
third
right?
component.
Like what
Yes,
how
yeah,
many
portion
sides are
size.
too many sides? Like we see this with
Hmm.
software all the time where it's just bloated with features. Like that's like the thing, it's got
Right.
so many sides. Like what are we doing here, you know? I don't know,
Instead of just doing
that's
one
kind of
thing
where I'm
well.
going with
Yeah.
it.
Well, one thing, and this is not super related to the conversation, but it kind of, as you were talking about taste, it reminded me of something that happened to me between taste of two different products recently. I was using Spotify for the longest time,
Mm-hmm.
and I love their interface. Their interface is fantastic. It works
Mm-hmm.
really well. Um, I won't get into all the other different things that, like, when it comes to predictive songs
Yeah.
to play, that kind of stuff. But as far as just loading the interface, me using the search bar, finding what I need, sorting between playlists, podcasts, whatever, adding things to my playlist, saving them, downloading everything, fantastic. Loved it. And then recently, I combined a bunch of stuff into an Apple, whatever the Apple One plan or the Plus plan, because Rebecca and I, we just wanted to consolidate some subscriptions. And it was just easier, it made more sense. So I'm like, okay, let's just port to Apple Music.
Right.
Tried Apple Music out. It technically plays everything I want that it has the
Mm-hmm.
licenses to, at least, but the interface is absolute garbage. And I would not expect that from Apple.
Mm-hmm.
There's this toggle to where, like, if I go to do the search bar and I search for like an artist, if I'm toggled to my playlist, it only searches my playlist. So I have to toggle back off to search the main library instead of
Mm.
it just searching globally for that song. I just want the song. I don't care if it's in
Right.
the
Right.
playlist or not.
Right.
And there was just so many little nuances here and there, and the main categories that you see for the things to play next and the mixes that it creates, that I thought, okay, this is just a learning curve because I've been using Spotify for 15 years. But I still,
Mm-hmm.
to this day, after using it for, I don't know, 3 months, it still trips me up. And I'm like, this is just not very intuitive to me. And
Mm.
so I think that is the kind of thing that normally an engineer would not care about. I did the
Right.
job. When you click the button, it streams. I technically have the functionality to add the playlist. I technically have the functionality to shuffle and do this. And for a long time, I wanted to be able to pair two songs together, like "We Will Rock You" and "We're the Champions." I want them to always play back to back, no matter how random it happens in my playlist. You
Yeah,
know,
that makes sense.
fun features like that.
Right.
So
Like a
that would be
hook.
kind of that would be kind of like your little flavor features to build, right?
Yeah.
But as engineers, all they cared about was we were able to serve the song requested, and we built the feature to add them to libraries and blah blah blah.
Right.
They didn't care about the flow and how it felt to use it per se, because that was really that's product's job. They care about the colors and if they're pretty and the brand design and how smooth the button feels when you click the toggle shuffle on or toggle,
Mm-hmm.
repeat
Mm-hmm.
on,
Mm-hmm.
and all these little things like that. But I think that is the taste that engineers need to have now. So
Right.
you end up bleeding into the product area. You need to have an opinion on that, because if you don't have an opinion on the taste of your product at this point, what are you doing to not get replaced by AI who can do
Right.
all the technical features?
Right.
The cool
Yeah.
things that the chef has in your analogy, what if we do this and that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I loved working with so many people different from so many different people from different backgrounds. I knew somebody who had a philosophy major. I knew one person who was an art major, English major, and then they became computer scientists. And the way they programmed and thought about things was super creative. They used different IDEs. The way they approached
Mm-hmm.
problem solving were different.
Right.
That's taste
Yeah.
coming from different backgrounds, applying that to computer science. And so that
Right.
same kind of thing is needed now. Every engineer needs that, to where, like, when you're working on a product, especially if you care about the company you're working at and you care about your paycheck coming in and you care about differentiating yourself from your competitors,
Yeah.
before, it's just a paycheck. I get that. I totally get that. I come from a background where sometimes you just need a paycheck, right? But now it's one of those things where, like, if you want the paycheck to keep coming in, your company has to do well. If you want
Right.
the company to do well, maybe you give a suggestion about something that you can see is not done very well. Or you think,
Yeah.
man, we're building this product. I use this other product over here that does it better. Maybe I should let my team know that I don't even use our own product because I don't think it is nearly as good as the one I use.
Right.
Tell them
Yeah.
why. Add your own flavor to it. This is a cool thing that we can do too. We even, it's not, I mean,
Right.
everyone steals features from other companies. Ah,
Yeah,
we should have that too. We
that's
should have
what
that
I
too.
was thinking of. Is
Yeah.
like surely you've used other software. Like there's so many features that
Yeah.
I've pulled from other industries or other verticals, and I'm like, oh, that's such a cool feature. That would work in like any of these other softwares that I built. And it's like people
Yep.
just may not have seen that before. So I think there's a taste there to bring to your software, both in the craft and in the finished product.
Or tagging two songs together. If two songs
Right.
always go like feeling that way in Any Time by Journey. They always go together on the radio. I don't know who decided that. But
Yeah.
when one goes off, the other comes on. Having it a random library, like doing something like that, differentiate yourself. That's a fun little idea. And also, if you care about music and you listen to the radio, like those songs do that. So bring it up to your product person. Hey, nobody has actually done this yet.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's
So
flavor.
yeah, so I like the flavor and the taste. I think one thing we used to talk about a lot, especially on this show, was tech debt. It was like, almost the common theme. And I think one thing I saw in my notes here that I wrote down, I don't even think I meant to write it down, but it was taste debt. I thought that was an interesting,
Taste that.
thought, because I'm sure you've had this experience too, but especially in my freelance work, I've had a lot of engagements where there was like a taste debt, like that's like the problem that they had, like was like,
Mm.
you know, even think the last generation of software before AI, like the problem we were often solving was pull me into this generate, like modernize my software and the UI and utilize, CSS3 and all of these new
Mm-hmm.
animations and like all the new stuff that we could do. I think that's kind of like, you know, getting into taste debt. I think there's something about the same UX that you hated. There's probably someone out there that's like, oh, I wish Spotify worked more like Apple Music and da da
Mm.
da. So it's like I
Yeah.
wonder if there's just like there always needs to be this taste element in a world where software has become cheaper to develop.
Yeah. Well, and what was your original quote again from
From Ruben,
Rubin? Yeah.
yeah, it is. My job is to not have any technical skill whatsoever. My job is to know what I like.
So I
And I
think that
guess,
kind of applies,
yeah,
like knowing what you like, because like even like you mentioned, if somebody liked those very things I hate about Apple Music, say them. At least have an
right,
opinion about it, right? Because like that's kind of we again, AI is making us more human in some ways because it's taking away the things that are mechanical that were like
yeah,
monotonous, and
hmm,
what's left with us is like differentiating ourselves in a creative way. If everyone can create Apple Music now and can create their own streaming platform, assuming everyone has rights to stream music, which they don't, but let's just pretend they do. If everyone could technically solve this problem and technically scale a music platform, what is left?
right,
What features you have, how nice it is to use, how much you pay your artists per stream, things like that. People start caring about who you are as a company, your mission. Maybe it's more moral because you pay better than anybody else when it comes to streams for your artists, or maybe they really love they follow. I know one person. I think actually it might have been the person who built the Spotify UI. I forget, a
hmm,
long time ago. I don't know if they were from Apple, from somewhere else, but they were famous for actually building their UI because it was like a famous producty person or UI person that had designed that. And
hmm,
people will follow that person and be like, wow, this person makes good designs or good products, that kind of thing.
right,
So if people take away the stuff, like again, if I sit at my desk 90% of the time I was coding and that's not a thing anymore, I need to have something else. And an opinion would be a great one to start with. Have an opinion. Like, what do you like?
right,
Like at this point, if I'm not coding 90% of the time, then I can at least tell people what I like about the product that I'm working on or what I
yeah,
don't like about it, how we can make it better. You know, have an opinion, be human.
yeah.
I think maybe that's just me being optimistic, but
I don't
I
think
have
so.
again been talking to way more people and caring way more about the product than before.
Yeah,
Because before I didn't have time to. Before I was like, oh,
right,
we have this sprint deadline, got to get this done, got to get that done, blah blah blah. And now it's like, okay, well, I have agentic stuff flowing in the background, doing it for me. Now I should probably reach out and talk to my product person and be like, ah, how about this? Or have we A/B tested that? Or have
right,
we considered personalization here? I can
right.
help
Just make it
them do
better and
that.
better and better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I,
especially coming from the tech side, things they may not know about.
exactly. Yeah, they may not realize it's a this kind of thing, now, there, I
Hmm.
think we're coming from a world where it used to be, it's weeks, it's months for any little thing. So like everything
Yeah,
has to be accounted for. And I think I believe that we're entering an era where we're going to go back to seeing like a lot more joy in software, like a lot more things for the sake of it just being cool in the software. It's not
yeah.
directly tied to something that makes you money. It's just a joyful way to work in the workflow.
I
That's kind
think you're
of like
right.
what I'm thinking.
Uh, we've already seen a ton of people dust off old passion projects and use
Oh
agentic
yeah.
flows to like. Oh, I know. I never had time to do this thing. I've always wanted to build like one of those little what do you call them? It's like the little bumpy waves whenever music plays. You used to see it on the
Yeah,
front of
I know what you're
old
talking about.
stereo systems,
Yeah,
right?
visualizer.
A visualizer. I
Yeah.
never built one, and I
Yeah.
kind of was
I was
like,
thinking that when you brought up Apple
yeah,
Music, I was like, what's stopping you nowadays to just build your own player? You
nothing.
don't have to be the
Yeah,
one streaming, but can you stream to like your own UI? Like that's maybe a product there. It's like build your own, or like this dynamic. I'm thinking of like dynamic UIs is probably a futuristic concept.
yeah.
Like a lot of people are talking about like what's the paradigm that software is going to like change like foundationally, and I think that's one of the things is like really dynamic UIs. Like my UI doesn't look like your UI, kind of
Ooh,
thing. In the same product, like in
personalized
the very
UIs in
same
that way. Yeah,
product.
or more
Um,
personalized than hello first name.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Way
or
more
dark mode
hyper
versus light
personalized, we
mode.
call it.
Yeah,
Yeah. The other thing I
interesting.
wanted to talk about too, at its core, that I think engineering is really about, and even product, like what are we all doing here to begin with? Like the thing that we're all
Hmm.
doing, regardless of your function, is solving problems for people. And I think like
Yeah.
regardless of what the technology is or how we do it, I feel like there's always that space for solving a problem in an elegant, way. Like people appreciate that. And I think that's not something that we see, machines doing that part of it.
Hmm.
It's just like I don't even know how they really could other than to offer suggestions, and then it's still about your taste, which is
Yeah.
subjective.
Well, one thing that will certainly change, especially with this agentic programming slash OpenClaw, if you've tinkered with
Mm-hmm.
that yet,
Yep.
is once you can start launching essentially your own companies or your own agencies of AI agents, then you can zoom out and go, well, what were some problems that we could not solve yesterday
Mm-hmm.
because it was a mechanical Turk problem? Like we had to have a lot of
Right.
people
Right.
parsing things. Or what are some things that people were doing today, like only big name companies could afford to do, and now the little guy with an army of AI agents could maybe cut into that profit space and actually do the same thing with less people. Um, one thing I was looking at recently was people trying to find hyperlocal events. There's like a company that does this. They
Mm-hmm.
look for hyperlocal events, and they have a series of people that will go and like curate each of these events and like make sure the event is up to date or on this main list and provide these as like an API to other people so they can share them on their calendars and that kind of thing. But they have a ton of people employed that can do this,
Mm-hmm.
like curate the event, essentially
Right.
scrape the website. What a human scraping the website, checking the website manually and seeing what they've got, confirming it's real, doing this. And this is all stuff that AI a year ago kind of sucked at. It would get weird. It would hallucinate things pretty badly. It would give you the wrong start
Right.
time, and that's not acceptable. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
people did it. And now in the last 3 weeks, even the new models are quite good at it, and they're only getting better. And so,
Right.
really thinking about spaces where the amount of money it would have taken for people to do it was not feasible, so people
Right.
never did it. Now that might be a thing you can use OpenClaw for or something else for. Um, or areas where there were just so many hurdle. Actually, the most interesting one to me: areas that are the slowest to adopt technology,
Mm-hmm.
that will be the most blindsided by a fast-paced AI. Like think
Yeah. Oh,
legal.
100%.
Legal is very slow.
Yeah.
Government very slow. Some healthcare
Mm-hmm.
stuff very slow. Um, what can you cut into in those spaces as a one-man company even
Right.
doing things or that were monotonous bits of labor that people were forced to do manually. So I guess what I'm getting at when it comes to the taste and the flavor thing is now, if you have an army of cheap engineers that can just build things,
Hmm.
why are you not out there trying to solve a problem? Unless you're just currently working at a company making you solve their problem,
I would even
which is
argue that
fine.
like you can make the same thing at home. Like, right, like
Mm-hmm.
there's like I had this revelation lately of like there's so many things I want to like teach my daughter. Like, oh, I can just build a game that
Mm-hmm.
teaches that concept through a game. And I can just do that with an agent that's running while I do other stuff. I just have to front load it with the. And so now it's
Yeah.
like, well, what else can I do? What can I build? Like, what programs can I create for my child to have this interactive or creative experience and lesson that is not like I would have normally had to pay some tutor or some crazy fancy extracurricular activity, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like, there's so many more things that you can do now, and I find myself doing the same types of things for myself as well. But it's like, what other problems do you have at home that you could solve? Like, you can build
Yeah.
your own like, air purifiers with a fan and filter type stuff now, like because you can have the agent build the technology, tell you what materials, walk you through the thing. It's like anything you want to
Yeah.
do, it's like it's there for you. So it's truly like a matter of taste. There's nothing stopping you
Right.
from creating the environment or the outcome that you want.
You've reminded me of this old game I used to play, and but
Okay.
before I learned how to type, my mom would play it, and she could type, and it's basically words falling out of the sky, and you have to like type them,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and blast them out of the sky, and like if they fall to the
yeah,
ground,
yeah.
you lose points. And she could type it fast, and I would like poke at it as fast as I could
Yeah,
before I could type. And I'm like, oh, I could probably just have Claude build that in a day or less than a day.
yeah,
Just thing where you're like trying to match words that are falling and get points when you clear them out. And you could use
yeah,
that to teach somebody both spelling and typing.
yeah,
Um, and it be easy to make and not have to pay $30 for whatever program. you know,
yeah.
it's wild.
Yeah, watch out, keyboard typing companies, like like all these like programs that, yeah, it's interesting. It's all that stuff can be like bespoke now. I think the corporation version of what I was just talking about is we may see people move away from software as a generic umbrella that you buy, and it's like each company has like a software builder in their IT department that is essentially just pumping out bespoke software and is the one that just is the more knowledgeable about
Mm.
getting the agent to work correctly and the do's and don'ts and the pitfalls. And I think that a lot of that stuff I think will still exist because we're always going to be pushing it. So I still think there's always going to be that technical need. I just imagine it's going to be, I can imagine there's this kind of bespoke
Hmm.
builder concept. And again, what does that come down to? Taste. That's
Yep.
my argument here. Anything else there?
All right. Uh, well, this is one of those evergreen topics, and I'm sure
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how this evolves over time. I know there's a lot of people out there, especially contemporaries of ours, that are not super thrilled about AI or thrilled,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be the doom of us all kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
if it's here to stay, may as well try to find some kind of good uses for it, or take advantage of it to become creative again. Because I feel like when I was a kid, I got to like play around with stuff and be creative. And then later it was like grunt work again. We have to get this, we have to get that done. So the idea of going back
Right.
to it, maybe trying to reframe it as like not doom and gloom kind of thing, but like, okay, this is a time where I can finally be creative again, or I can let the artistic part of me that I had to kind of suppress in favor of getting things to market, as fast as possible. Now this is something, a way I can make sure like at some point we're not building things too fast, because if we
Mm-hmm.
go too fast, then we're actually building the wrong thing. We actually have to slow down to understand the problem,
Right.
right? And
Yep.
that's where the taste part comes in. So that does buy us more time. Before we had a team that had to do that because
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have time to do it the way we're doing it. And we didn't have time to really give feedback and kind of bounce it. Like we had to go to market, go to market. And now we're
Right.
moving so fast that we're like, be careful, don't build the wrong thing. Let's make sure we got the context right before we start. Because, we don't want to waste all the precious Claude tokens or usage, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So I
but
have
yeah,
a quote I'll end us with, if that's okay.
sure.
Not necessarily a quote from someone, but I guess more of a thought or an idea. to think about to kind of go back to the music analogy that we had with Rick Rubin. So if you think about AI agents as session musicians, so think if you were like going to go record something, they have something called session musicians. So those people come in and they're kind of the technical part of the music, so you could think of, and they'll play anything, right? So these AI agents, they'll play anything that you want them to do. You can create any song that you would want to hear. I think the question that we're getting at here today is, do you know what song you're making? That's it.
I like it. Thanks for listening. This is Isaac Askew.
Dustin Ray.
And this has been another episode of Never Rewrite.